The RV smelled like a mix of plastic and stale cinnamon. Kayla had plugged in one of those scented things, the kind that tried to pretend a space was cleaner, newer, warmer than it really was. It didn't work. The walls still sweated from heat during the day, and at night, the cold crept in through the cracks in the aluminum. Ethan had called it a solution, his voice all gentle reason. Just until you figure things out, Mom. He'd smiled as he said it, not cruelly, but not kindly either. Like someone offering a chair to a guest who had overstayed. The RV was parked behind their garage, next to the trash bins. Kayla had even laid out a little mat by the door, like a welcome, but it only made the message louder. This wasn't a home. It was a holding pen. They hadn't kicked me out. That would have been honest. Instead, it was the soft push of suggestions. Maybe avoid using the kitchen too much. Maybe keep your things in the tote under the sink, so it's tidy. Maybe stick to the instant coffee. The espresso machine is a bit finicky. I nodded, smiled, complied. But the part of me that used to host Christmas dinners for 20 sat quietly and watched it all. And she remembered. The RV's silence changed me. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gradually, like water soaking into old wood. Days passed marked only by the sound of birds or the clang of the neighbors' trash bins. At first, I tried to stay upbeat. Smiled when Ethan brought over leftovers in Tupperware. Nodded when Kayla offered me herbal teas she didn't drink herself. I tried to keep my tone light. Grateful. But something inside me was growing heavier. The kitchen in their house was off limits. Not explicitly, of course. Kayla just always seemed to be cleaning it when I walked in. Always mid-sanitizing, spraying down counters. She'd smile, say, "Oh, don't worry, I've got it." Or, "Let me bring you something instead." So I stopped coming in. I stopped offering. My things were kept in a labeled bin under the sink. My coat hung on a hook behind the RV door. My slippers never crossed their threshold. I'd become very small in my own life. Ethan said it was for my comfort. That the RV gave me privacy, freedom, autonomy. He used words like independent living and self-contained. I used to work in hospice, I know what those words really mean. One night, I sat with a notebook and made a list of where I'd lived over the years. Our starter home in Akron. The duplex we rented after Russell got laid off. The colonial we finally bought, where I raised Ethan, where I planted the roses out front and learned to hem curtains and fix a dripping tap. That house was mine. But after Russell died, Ethan insisted it was too much for me. Too many stairs. Too many repairs. Too many memories. He said he worried about me being alone. Then he made sure I would be. He called a family meeting 2 weeks after the funeral. Sat across from me at my own dining table, Kayla holding his hand like he was announcing something brave. "We've been talking," he said. "And we think it's time to make a plan." I remember the words exactly. Not a question, not a suggestion, a plan. One they'd already made. They talked about my safety. My finances. They didn't ask if I was happy in the house. They didn't ask if I was sleeping, eating, breathing. They told me the roof needed replacing. That the taxes would rise. That it would be such a relief not to worry about all that upkeep. I hadn't said yes. Not really. I just nodded, too tired to fight. They sold the house within 3 weeks. Said they got a great offer. I didn't see the listing photos until later, my curtains still in the windows, my furniture in the background. They hadn't waited for me to leave before they staged it. I was already gone in their minds. They gave me options, of course. Kayla's parents had a finished basement, Ethan said. Or maybe a retirement complex closer to downtown. They showed me brochures. One even had a bowling league. I chose the RV. It was the only choice that didn't make me feel erased. That was months ago. Now, mornings began with the thrum of the water heater. I'd heat my tea on the plug-in kettle, write in my journal, and take walks behind the property when the weather allowed. I stopped asking for news about the family. Kayla was pregnant again. I learned that from a phone call she took on speaker in the kitchen, not from her lips. She didn't see me standing in the hallway. One afternoon, Ethan brought me papers to sign. Just to simplify things, he said. Power of attorney. Emergency contacts. A financial oversight clause. It's not like we're expecting anything to happen, Mom. It's just a formality. I stared at the pen in his hand. I'd prefer to review these, I said. Calmly. He blinked. Of course. No pressure. Just let me know. He left the folder on the table. I opened it after he walked away. The documents were all filled out, typed neatly, with only my signature missing. My full legal name, our old address, Russell's name struck through. No mention of my bank account. No mention of the trust fund Russell had set up after his mother died. They didn't know about that. Or the property in Maine. Or the investment accounts in my maiden name. Russell always believed in contingencies. Just in case, he'd say. Not because I don't trust Ethan, but because you shouldn't need to. I used to roll my eyes at that. Now I understood. That night, I pulled the shoebox from under the bed. Inside, a flash drive, a small brass key, a folder labeled with my handwriting, Russell, accounts. I hadn't looked at it since the funeral. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Bank names. Account numbers. Passwords written in pencil. He'd updated them the week before his heart attack. He'd known. There was a note too. Just one line, written in his crooked left hand. Don't let them decide what's best for you. I sat with that for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, old, slow, but still working, and began logging in. It took me hours. I had to reset passwords, verify identity questions, remember things I hadn't thought of in years. When I finally reached the investment account, the screen loaded slowly, as if it too had aged. Then it showed me the number. $3,234,018.92. I stared at it. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I didn't feel vindicated or angry. Just still. The next day, Ethan knocked with a smile and a container of chili. He asked if I'd thought about the papers. I need more time, I said. He nodded, a little too quickly. After he left, I deleted the document copies from the laptop. Changed the password. Wiped the browser history. I wasn't ready to act. But I was done being still. I started planning in silence. Not out of fear, but caution. There's a difference. Fear makes you freeze. Caution makes you watch. So I watched. I listened. I waited. Ethan didn't bring up the paperwork again. Maybe he assumed I was stalling. Or maybe he sensed something had shifted and didn't want to push. He still brought me food occasionally, always in containers I never asked for, always under the guise of kindness. Kayla stopped waving from the kitchen window. We'd become co-inhabitants of the same land, not family. And that was fine. Russell and I used to talk about what we'd do, if we ever got a second chance. The idea had always been quiet. Private. Something tucked into late-night conversations over tea. A house near the water. A wood stove. A garden we didn't have to rush through. I always assumed he was humoring me. He wasn't. I found the deed folded inside the investment folder. Property in Maine, purchased in both our names 10 years ago. Fully paid. Taxes current. No mortgage. I vaguely remembered the trip. Russell had called it a long weekend to see an old client. I'd stayed home with a flu. Now I knew better. He'd gone to buy us a future. I booked a phone consultation with the estate attorney listed in the files. Connie West. I remembered the name. She'd sent a condolence card after the funeral, but I hadn't paid attention then. Now I read her letter again, carefully. Her words were precise. Respectful. The tone of someone who doesn't condescend. We spoke the following Thursday. I sat outside the RV in a lawn chair Ethan had given me the week after Russell died. The plastic was cracked now. Sun faded. Connie's voice on the line was calm. Assured. Mrs. Lawson, she said, Russell left you in a stronger position than most widows I've seen in 20 years. Then why do I feel like I have nothing? She paused. Because no one's reminded you that it's yours. We reviewed everything. The trust. The house. The accounts. Even a modest insurance policy Russell had opened under his old employer's credit union. Just a cushion, he'd written in a note Connie had scanned for me. For when you need to choose yourself. I did something that night I hadn't done in years. I opened a bottle of wine, not the sweet grocery kind Ethan sometimes brought, but the last bottle Russell had hidden away in the back of the RV's tiny cabinet. He must have stashed it before the move. A dark red from a vineyard we once visited. I poured a glass and made a quiet toast. To seeing things clearly. Finally. I didn't drink much. I wasn't celebrating. I was anchoring. Over the next week, I slowly began detaching. I stopped reacting. I stopped initiating. When Kayla left a pile of mail on the RV step, I didn't thank her. When Ethan asked if I needed anything, I said, no, I'm fine, and I meant it. I moved differently, too. Took longer walks. Stayed out later in town. Went to the library, opened a new account. Started reading again, books I wanted, not the ones recommended by cheerful grief counselors or retirement bloggers. I bought a notebook and began sketching what I wanted from the main property. I listed names of people I'd lost contact with but might want to find again. Women who used to sit at my kitchen table during PTA meetings, who cried in my car after divorces, who held my hand when Russell's mother passed. Women who knew how to plant things. Fix things. Keep things alive. I wasn't trying to start a commune. I just didn't want to end my life being managed. One morning, I woke before sunrise. The RV was cold, the space heater clicking uselessly in the corner. I made tea, pulled on 2 sweaters, and sat at the window watching light creep up over the back fence. And I realized something. I hadn't heard from Ethan in 4 days. It should have worried me. But it didn't. At noon, he knocked. Everything okay? He asked, squinting like I'd somehow changed shape. I think so, I said. He hesitated. Kayla's thinking of taking the kids to her sister's for a while. Things have been tense. I nodded. He waited for me to say something else. I didn't. Anyway, he added, just wanted to check in. You good on groceries? I looked him in the eye. I've got everything I need. He stood there for a moment, then gave a strange half-smile. Okay. Well, let us know. I closed the door slowly. Locked it. That night, I packed a suitcase. Not a dramatic exit. Just the essentials. Clothes for the cold. A few keepsakes. Russell's letters. Hazel, the neighbor's cat who now lived half in the RV with me, paced near the door. She could sense it. I was leaving. I didn't know what I'd find in Maine. I didn't care. It would be mine. I left a note on the kitchenette counter. Simple. Not angry. Just true. Thank you for the space. I've found a better one. I left early. Dawn still low, sky pink. Hazel in the passenger seat, curled in my scarf. My phone buzzed as I pulled onto the main road. Ethan. I didn't answer. Let him wonder. Let him sit in the same silence I'd been given. The road north was long, but my shoulders felt lighter with every mile. Like something was being peeled off my back. Grief, yes. But also the weight of being watched. Being processed. Being gently dismissed. The drive took 2 days. I stayed in a motel halfway through, paid in cash. Ate a tuna sandwich in silence and watched a weather report that didn't matter. When I arrived, the house looked almost unreal. As if it had waited patiently, untouched by all the noise. It was smaller than I remembered from the photos. White siding. A crooked porch. A single light left on inside by the property manager. It wasn't much. But it was enough. I parked the car. Sat there for a while, staring. Then I opened the door. Hazel jumped out first. And I walked inside. The house smelled like dry wood and old air. Not musty, not rotted, just still. As if time had settled here and waited, politely, for me to return. Hazel trotted in ahead of me, tail high, confident as if she'd always lived here. She circled the living room once, then hopped onto the wide front windowsill and stared out into the trees. It was small. A living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom. A narrow staircase led to a short attic. No basement, but the shed out back was sound. There was dust, and the floors creaked, and the pipes needed flushing. But the bones were strong. Russell always said to buy a house for its bones, not its paint. I opened all the windows first. The breeze smelled of pine and cold. Then I walked the perimeter, 3 acres. Overgrown blueberry bushes, a rusted fire pit, a small garden bed overtaken by weeds. There was a clothesline still strung between 2 trees. A single wooden bench by the creek that ran low and steady at the edge of the property. Russell had carved our initials into one of the porch beams. M+R. I ran my fingers over it and felt everything I'd forgotten I was allowed to feel. Grief that didn't need to be managed. Solitude that wasn't a burden. That night, I slept in the back bedroom. No curtains yet. The stars were the only witnesses. Hazel curled on the blanket beside me. I listened to the wind and the creak of the roof and the unfamiliar, welcome quiet. I woke with the sun. Coffee first. Then repairs. I made a list. Replace window screens. Paint porch. Clean gutters. Patch driveway. Fix the back door hinge. Simple things. Physical things. I went into town and bought supplies. The hardware store owner called me Han and didn't ask where my husband was. The grocer gave me a free bunch of carrots after I complimented the beets. Small kindnesses. No one here knew my story, and that was the greatest relief of all. By the end of the first week, the house felt different. Warmer. A little more mine. I cooked from scratch for the first time in months. Lit candles. Found a local station that played classical music at dusk. I called Connie and gave her the updated mailing address. She didn't sound surprised. Russell would be proud, she said. I don't know if I'm doing it right. Michelle, she said, you're doing it. That's what matters. The next week, I cleared out the attic. Found boxes Russell had stored years ago, old journals, photographs, receipts, maps, sketches. He must have planned this place more than I realized. In one box, I found a note. If you're here alone, it means you chose something better. There was no signature. He didn't need one. The next day, I walked into the small local library and posted a flyer. Seeking quiet hands for quiet work. Land, tools, room provided. No drama. No pity. Just women helping women. I didn't expect anything right away. I just needed to feel like I wasn't the only woman who'd ever looked around her life and said, quietly, no more. But 3 days later, I got my first letter. It was from a woman named Judith. 61. Retired nurse. Divorced. Her son had moved her in after her surgery last year, but it turned out he needed someone to watch the grandkids and cook the meals while he and his wife worked late. She said she felt invisible in her own story. She asked if I had a place where she could be seen again. I wrote her back the next day. Told her there was a guest room with a window that looked out on birch trees. That she'd have her own key. That there'd be no expectations beyond respect and space. She arrived 2 weeks later with one suitcase and a toolbox. She didn't cry when she saw the house. But she stood on the porch for a long time. This is the first time in years someone opened a door for me without asking what I brought, she said. We ate soup that night. Sat by the fire and shared just enough to know we weren't alone in how much we'd given. Judith taught me how to properly replace a window frame. I showed her how to prune blueberry bushes. Hazel approved of her immediately. A week after that, another letter came. Then 2 more. May was 74 and had lived in her car for nearly 8 months after her daughter's husband said she was too negative to be around the kids. Teresa was 56, widowed twice, and her brother's family had kindly offered her their pool house, which she cleaned in exchange for rent. I made room. The guest room became Judith's. Teresa moved into the attic after we cleared it out and added a skylight. May took the garden shed, we insulated it, painted it, and added a cot and a rug. She cried the first time we served her coffee in a real mug. They were not broken women. Just weathered. We worked together. Cooked. Shared stories when we wanted, silence when we didn't. We built shelves. Raised garden beds. Tiled the bathroom floor. Nothing was perfect, but everything was chosen. One morning, Teresa brought me a folder. What's this? You said you used to keep the books in your house. Figured you might want to again. Inside were neatly typed budgets. Expense logs. Plans for winterizing. Projected costs for another shed if we wanted to expand. I looked at her. You did all this? She shrugged. I used to be an accountant. Until my husband said I was working too much and not focusing on the home. I handed her the folder back. Then you're in charge of finances. She blinked. Really? I nodded. We don't waste talent here. That night, we sat around the fire with blankets and tea and listened to May read from an old book of poetry she'd kept in her trunk. Hazel wandered from lap to lap, as if checking in. No one mentioned children. Or regrets. Or losses. We didn't have to. It was in the way we moved, slowly and without apology. In the way we listened without fixing. And in the way none of us asked for permission anymore. It was a Thursday when they showed up, no call, no letter, no warning. I'd just come in from the garden, dirt still under my nails, hands rough from morning weeding. Judith was boiling water for tea, and May was humming near the porch, folding towels for the line. Hazel jumped off the windowsill before the sound of tires reached us. A car. A blue sedan, newer, slowing down just past the mailbox. It turned into the drive. I knew before I saw their faces. Ethan stepped out first. Older. Gaunter. Not the man who smiled with polite condescension at the RV door. His shirt was wrinkled. His jaw unshaven. And his eyes, they looked like Russell's once did after his father's funeral. Not hollow. Just done. Kayla followed, slower. Her belly round, unmistakably pregnant. Her face pale. No makeup. She moved like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks. She didn't look at me. I stood still on the porch as they approached. Ethan stopped 3 feet away, as if unsure of the border. "Hi, Mom." I nodded. "Hello." We didn't know where else to go. I said nothing. He looked down, cleared his throat. "I lost the job in February. The second one, too. Kayla's hours got cut. We tried, we really tried. But we've been in the car for 4 nights. The motel wouldn't extend us without a deposit." Kayla said nothing. She gripped the strap of her purse with both hands. Her belly shifted under her coat. The silence between us was dense, but not cruel. "You came here," I said finally. "Yes." "Why?" Ethan swallowed. "Because I remembered what Dad used to say about this place. That it was safe." I looked past him at the car. The back seat was full, blankets, a baby carrier, a box of crackers, some diapers. No children in sight. I asked the only question I needed to: "Are you ready to be small again, if this is what it takes to rebuild?" Ethan looked me in the eye for the first time in years. "Yes." I turned to Judith, who had stepped outside. "Can you help Kayla get settled in the side cottage?" She nodded without hesitation. Teresa emerged next, already unlocking the supply cabinet. I didn't offer hugs. Didn't say I was glad they came. I didn't have to. That night, I made soup. Set out 4 bowls. Ethan sat at the edge of the table like a boy again, back straight, hands in his lap. "I can sleep in the shed," he said. "I don't want to displace anyone." "You won't," I said. "There's room." He ate slowly. Said thank you. Asked questions, real ones, about the repairs, the routines, the work we did each day. He didn't talk about his job. Or Kayla. Or the baby. And I didn't ask. In the days that followed, he worked without being told. He cleared the overgrown west path. Repaired 2 leaking pipes in the laundry room. Fixed the draft in May's shed with weather stripping he found in town. Kayla kept to herself at first. Rested. Slept long hours. Then she started helping with bookkeeping, sitting beside Teresa in the early evenings, sorting receipts and bills. By the 2nd week, she offered to take over the early morning chicken feedings. "It's quiet then," she said. "It helps." Judith watched her closely, arms folded one morning as we sipped tea. "She's afraid," she said. "She should be," I answered. "I don't mean of you. Of herself." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. One afternoon, I found Ethan on the back porch, sanding a piece of wood for a bench. He looked up as I approached but didn't stop working. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "Good," I said. "Because I don't." He nodded, eyes down. "I see what we did," he added. "I didn't before." "Not really. I thought I was being helpful." I sat beside him on the steps. "You managed me," I said. "Like a problem to solve." "I know. And when I stopped making things easy for you, you stopped seeing me as family." He looked up. "That's not true." It felt like it. We sat in silence. Birds sang somewhere near the creek. Hazel wandered by, tail flicking, unbothered. "You know the difference between this place and your RV?" I asked. "What?" "I'm allowed to take up space here. I don't have to earn it. He nodded. Said nothing. That was enough. The baby came in late June. Kayla went into labor just after dinner, and we didn't have time for a hospital. Judith delivered him in the guest room with the windows open and candles lit. I held Kayla's hand when she asked, but she didn't say thank you. That was all right. The baby was healthy. Small, but strong. They named him Noah. Ethan carved the name into a wood plaque and hung it above the cottage door. No one asked him to. He just did. The summer passed quietly. Rhythms returned. Ethan rose before dawn and started repairs on the barn we planned to convert into a gathering space. Kayla planted herbs outside her window. The others didn't offer opinions. Just let them work. One morning, Kayla came into the main house and left a folder on the kitchen table. Inside, typed documents. A lease agreement. Terms of use. Utility contributions. We want to stay, she said. As tenants. Not guests. Not family. I read the papers in silence. They were fair. Modest rent. Commitments to shared labor. A clause allowing for reevaluation each year. No assumptions. No entitlement. I nodded. One condition, I said. If I'm ever treated like a burden again, it ends. No conversation. No arguments. Just the door. Kayla nodded. And for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't seem offended. She seemed relieved. By autumn, the leaves turned fast, rust and gold, then brown and gone. The morning air sharpened. We started stacking firewood and insulating the second shed, preparing for the cold. Everyone had their tasks. No one needed reminders. Noah was nearly 4 months old. He liked staring up at the beams in the living room, tracking the ceiling fan with round, unblinking eyes. I held him sometimes, not often. Kayla didn't ask for help, and I didn't offer unless she looked tired enough to accept. That was our rhythm now, space where it used to be silence, respect where there had once been polite management. The land changed with us. What was once scattered, overgrown, unsure had become purposeful. There were paths now, dirt ones, shaped by use, not plans. The overgrown garden had been pulled back into rows. The chicken coop had fencing and a little hand-painted sign, keepers of eggs. May had named every bird. Judith wrote a daily weather log. Teresa ran inventory on pantry staples as if we were feeding an army. We weren't a commune. We weren't a family. But we were something. One afternoon in late October, I sat on the porch with my ledgers. Hazel slept on my lap. Ethan emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on his jeans. I finished the shelves in the pantry, he said. And the insulation's holding. I nodded. Good. He stood there, waiting. Not for praise. Just acknowledgement. It was a change I'd noticed. He no longer looked for approval the way he used to. Not from me. Maybe not from anyone. How long do you think this will last? He asked suddenly. This? He gestured around us. The peace. The stillness. The balance. I looked out at the trees. As long as we protect it. He sat beside me on the step. I used to think stability came from locking things down. Planning. Owning. And now I think it comes from being willing to start over without punishing yourself for having to. I didn't say anything. But I listened. That was new, too, for both of us. Kayla came out an hour later with Noah strapped to her chest. She handed me a folded piece of paper. I thought you should see this. It was a letter. From a woman in Ohio. Her name was Lorna. 58. She wrote with a trembling hand, she said. Not because of age, but because of how long it had taken her to believe she deserved to ask for help. Her story echoed ours, gently pushed out, then forgotten, then humiliated for not bouncing back fast enough. She'd seen the flyer, passed along by a friend of a friend. I don't need charity, she wrote. Just space. Just trust. Just time. I turned the page over. Kayla had already responded. Typed. Polite. Clear. We have room. We have expectations. We don't rescue, but we welcome. KL. She waited for my reaction. She'll need her own space, I said. The second shed, Kayla replied. Ethan said it could be finished in 2 weeks. I nodded. Let's make sure the floor's sealed. And get another propane heater before the prices go up. She smiled, small but real. Then she went back inside. Later that night, I stood in the kitchen, looking at the photo I'd hung by the pantry, Russell on the porch of this same house, holding a mug, squinting into the sun. I hadn't even remembered taking it. I wondered what he'd say now. Maybe nothing. Or maybe, told you. I thought back to the first morning I woke up in the RV. The smell of damp fabric. The way the curtain barely shut against the light. How careful I was not to make noise, not to take up space. Now, if I dropped a pan in this house, 5 heads would turn, but not one of them would ask why I was in the kitchen. That was the difference. I wasn't being tolerated. I was part of the structure. Winter settled in slow. The snow came early, just a dusting, then disappeared. Enough to remind us it was coming for real. Ethan and Kayla sealed the windows. Teresa made a rotation schedule for heat usage. Judith taught us all how to make lentil soup from memory. The fireplace became our evening gathering point. May read aloud. Sometimes poetry, sometimes old letters she found in books. One night, she read something Russell had written in the margins of an engineering manual. A good foundation doesn't resist the weight, it holds it. Ethan looked up from his corner seat. Did Dad write that? Yes. He nodded slowly. He was preparing you. I didn't know I'd need it. You didn't, Ethan said. But he did. We fell into silence after that. Not heavy. Just quiet. A few days before Christmas, Teresa organized a small meal. Nothing grand. Root vegetables. Fresh bread. Cider. The house was full but calm. No one argued about where to sit or what to bring. There were no gifts, just shared food and candlelight. Kayla stood after dessert, holding Noah. I didn't know what this would be, she said. I thought we were coming here to hide. She looked at me. But you weren't hiding. You were waiting for the rest of us to grow up. No one clapped. No one nodded. But we all heard it. I didn't respond. Some truths don't need repeating. Later that night, I stepped out onto the porch alone. The snow had started again, soft, dry, slow. Hazel followed, settling at my feet. I looked out over the land. The dark outline of the garden. The smoke rising from the cottage chimney. The lights still on in the barn. I didn't think about Ethan as a child. Or Russell as a husband. Or myself as someone who used to belong to someone else. I just stood there. A woman. A builder. A keeper of her own time. No drama. No explanations. No titles. Only peace. And that, at last, was mine.